Your Excellency, Dr. Kadri Obafemi Amzat, Deputy Governor of Lagos State, my brother of the Silk, Mr. Yemi Candid Johnson, SAN, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to this session, and I'm sure there was supposed to be the speaker. The Honorable Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly was also a panelist, but owing to some state duties, is unable to be with us. He sends his apologies. So going straight into the topic for today's session, largely strengthening institutions, I would like to start with Mr. Candid Johnson, SAN. So there's been a lot of intellectual debate about what do we need really in Nigeria. Do we need strong institutions or do we need strong men? What side of the divide are you?
I think we need strong institutions is the simple and short answer. And the reason is because we cannot rely on the rule of men. The purpose of institutions is to curtail the natural tendency of human beings to exceed the power that they have, to abuse it, and to act in their own self-interest. This is a natural human condition. So the reason why we create institutions, including the rule of law, accountability in government, transparency, and the institutions of state which maintain those aspects of the order of a state, is because we cannot trust our lives to the hands of men.
Thank you very much. Deputy Governor of Lagos State, you have vast experience in governance in Lagos State, having been a two-time commissioner for science and technology, and also served as a commissioner for works. In your view, this debate about strong institutions and strong men, do you think our institutions are strong enough to deliver the dividends of democracy, what the people want, where there is no strong leader in place?
Thank you very much. I think it's an interesting question. And when you insert somebody in between two senior advocates, I mean. But on a more serious note, I think everything in life to me is dynamic, and we must see. So you notice that countries that are making developmental progress, China, United Arab Emirates, even now Turkey, for some reason, are now not necessarily, they are strong men. So, but those strong men also now build great institutions. But I think we must look at it very well. When the United States started the FBI, Mr. Hoover was a bully. He was a bully for about 40 years or 48 years or so that he ran FBI. But in the process, that institution became very strong, well implemented, and so on. So I think human beings make institutions. So institutions don't just exist. They are made up of human beings. So I think it's a balance. It's a balance. So which is every other thing that we know. I think what separates us from this great institution is just the rule of law and technology. So when you are a strong man, you must still operate within that law. I think that's the important thing. So for us as a people, I think the difference between us and the so-called developed industry is the rule of law and, in my view, science and technology. So if you can get those two things right, so which means it's okay to be a strong guy, but you must operate within certain rules that's applicable to everybody. So in those countries, you see that, I remember I was reading the history of Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew was a strong guy. And they need a strong person at that time. During the time of Governor Fashola, we actually met him in Singapore, and that was what he told us. It was very clear that at that time, if they didn't do that, they will all just perish. But they had, the rule of law was there. He told us an example of his closest friend, who was the foreign minister, that broke the law because he was adamant that the rule of law must take place. The guy committed suicide. So I think it's a question of how do we balance it so that that strong man doesn't now think he's above the law. The moment we can institutionalize our laws, so if we are a nation of laws, I think we'll be fine. But we also need people that have conviction, whether we call them strong but they certainly can be weak, but we must build people that will be ready to now apply those laws, irrespective of who is affected. And I think that's where it is.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Mr. Candid Johnson has...
If I might make an additional comment. I think that perhaps what we're doing is not pinning down the terms to which should anchor our discussion. When we talk of strong men, what comes to my mind is an individual, a human being who personifies the entire executive, legislative, in fact, judicial power of a state, like a king. That is a tradition we had in our history. But when we speak of institutions of modern government, I do not contemplate merely physical institutions. I contemplate the rule of law to be the most important institution of modern political society. I consider that the independence of the judiciary, constitutional democracy, that those are fundamentals of modern government. And since the topic is about governance, this is how I would take it back to that issue. What is governance? Why do human beings institute governance? It's not for the purpose of individuals. You know, when I was told I had to come and sit on this panel with these distinguished gentlemen, I thought I should wear a kaftan because I didn't want to be mistaken for somebody in government. So I wanted to make it clear I'm not. But then the important point to make is that we're all in government. And this is back to what I was thinking about when I said it. What is it? Why do human beings institute government? It's for security, for social order, and for human progress. This is the function of government. How do we secure those essential functions? And what are the things that threaten them? They're threatened by despots. They're threatened by people who do not respect the law. They're threatened by people who consider their own interests to be above those of the community. Because the very idea of constituting a government, for a start, is a recognition that human beings need to work together for their common security, for their social order, and for public services. So if one person will subvert that idea, he destroys the whole idea of the state and destroys the basis of governance. So when we're thinking of how to proceed, how do we secure that the attributes for which reason we instituted government will be preserved? The rule of law, the constitutional form, that judges, that the government will be bound by the law, that the government will insist that people participate in their governance. Because participation of the public, I know there's a topic hereafter about citizens' participation. Participation by citizens is for the citizens' benefit, but it's also for the benefit of the government. Because if government does not persuade people that they are part of governing themselves, and that the contracts, the social and political contracts on which basis government has been ceded power by the people, if they're not satisfied that it is being administered for their purpose, then government is going to have to suppress them by force. So if government wants to have peace, which is the function for which it was established, then it has to recognize that the impediments that work against that, including ignorance of the public, an ignorant and uneducated public, for example, is a great danger to the stability of government. So people need to be educated. A hungry and desperate people are a direct threat to the stability of government because they will divorce themselves from the government that you administer. So that's something that people have to do. Do people feel secure? Do people feel that they are part, even with the clubs? I was discussing this in respect of a social club a few days ago. I said the committee cannot govern as if they have absolute power. Because if the people think that they're abusing power, there is going to be disruption persistently, and then you have to put guns to people's heads. So there again, I think that the important thing about governance, about security, and about development is that they're all linked to the institutions which we understand, the rule of law, an independent judiciary, an inclusive political and social and legal agenda. So that's just, I'm sorry if I talk too much. Just want to expand on my initial thinking.
Thank you very much. So, well, I mean, a school of thought thinks that the reason why we don't have strong governmental institutions in Nigeria is because largely there's a wide gulf between the governor and the governed. There is what you also, there's a lot of mistrust. People don't trust their government. In your view, Mr. Candid Johnson, how can this gulf be bridged?
You know, if we take as a basis that government is instituted in the interest of the people, and that it's their safety and security and progress that it is instituted to assure, then it becomes a major quandary. Why, if that is what government is set up for, do the people not trust the government? And a friend of mine who once occupied your own exalted seat said to me something many years ago, which I think is intrinsic to the thinking of the government of Lagos State. He said, government is about three things. It's about policy, it's about planning, and it's about communication. If your policy is a policy that is in the interest of the people of Lagos State, then you will make plans, including your legislative, your executive agenda, how you roll out, where you put funds that supports that purpose. And you will still fail if you cannot persuade the people that what you're doing is what you promised and it is in their interest. So upstairs now I was listening to one of the topics. They're talking about the 1 billion naira fund set aside for the entertainment industry. It has not been accessed. And I just thought that's completely ridiculous. Because it is the function of those who administer that fund, because the reason why they have that fund is because it's a tool of governments. That the people who need this money are a critical actor in the economy of Lagos State. The commissioner said upstairs that, or somebody on the panel said that the entertainment industry is the second largest employer in the state. You know, many years ago, I went to see a friend in New Jersey, and he gave me a story which explained to me the importance that government ought to place on those who generate jobs and income. He said that Prudential Insurance in New Jersey employs 60,000 people. When the governor of New Jersey wants to see the CEO of Prudential, he calls the CEO's secretary to make an appointment. Now, I don't expect public officers in Africa to be so humble, but it's not necessary to do that. But the point is that that story indicates that government requires that you reach out your hand. It's a responsibility. First of all, if you are at the pinnacles of government, you're going to be insulted, you're going to be disrespected. This is standard. I mean, my children insult me, never mind if I was the governor. This is normal because I govern them as well. But the fact is that it's now the job of those who accept the responsibility of government and who have the primary function of executing that simple human mission to persuade. Therefore, if I was the commissioner of tourism, I would seek out, it would be a priority for me to be sure that that 1 billion is expended on exactly the points. I would not sit down on what looks like a high horse and expect people to come for me. It's my job. And there again, it's the job of government to persuade. It's the job of the head of a family to lead his family. It's the job of government to say, this is why we're doing this. It's for you. What do you think? In much of the legislative body of legislation in the UK, when public organizations carry out functions, there is a compulsory period of consultation. It's not because they don't know what they want to do. It's because they want the people to understand that they were part of that decision and it is for their benefit. So many cases, you will know in administrative law, if you haven't carried out consultation, the court will strike down the legislation. because the consultation is compulsory. It's not just the legalism, it's to communicate and to ensure that the government defends itself by making the public participate in what governs them. That's how you break down the barrier of trust, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, the Deputy Governor, how do you think this mistrust between the governed and the governors affect the institutions of governance?
Thank you very much. So I think I will respond a little bit to, or contribute to what the senior advocate just mentioned. So I think it has to also do with our history. So we were ruled by colonial masters. So at the time, you are a hero when you fight government because you are being ruled by foreigners. I think we've carried that over till now. So in terms of even selection of people that will access that money. So for example, he knows you very well, you're a senior advocate, I know you. You cannot travel out of this country without a passport. So that passport is what that ministry is asking for. In that New Jersey, everybody is known. Everybody is known. You have a social security number. You are not a floating mass. So as a matter of fact, when you give birth to a child in that society, you go and register. The reverse is the case. So it is important because it's also public fund that I am sure that, oh, you are not a tailor because it's meant for entertainment industry. So I need you to register just like I need you to provide a passport in order to travel. Not that I don't like you, but it's just for me to be able to recognize. So that's the challenge. So we need to bridge a gap where we cannot be anonymous in our country. So we, for example, when if there is an accident, you get somebody, a driver, you check, and the guy has registered. When you actually trace that address, 6 out of 10 times it's wrong. You understand? So people register, they don't give their own address. So we need to rebuild, and it was in the first session, I think it was Professor Dugan, that lady from South Africa, that was talking about, and it was very impressive when he was referring to what JFK said as the President of America. The reality is, government cannot function without the people, like you rightly said. And I think it was Thomas Jefferson that also said that society will break down when citizens don't participate. So we must participate. And what that means is, it's important for us as a people to understand that we are a fabric, and everything must link together. Without it, government won't even be able to function. So it's important for, like people say, I mean, what you can't measure, you cannot manage it. That's why, because of the constitutionality of Nigeria and so on and so forth, that's why, for example, Lagos State started the Lagos State Registration Agency. Let me give you an example. Lagos State government says we pay WAEC fees for all our students in public schools. But this is what happens. So when people are in SS2, which is the penultimate to the final year, so let's say the number is 120,000. By the time it gets to SS3, it goes to 190. What happens? So what happens is because people want us to pay for that WAEC fee, people come from other states. Well, unfortunately, there's no visa, so we really can't stop. But it's important for us to be able, in order to even plan, how much budget do we even place for WAEC fee? The truth is we don't know, because people can just come. So it's a challenge. And therefore, I think as Nigerians, like, that musician said, Bob Marley, we must free ourselves from mental slavery. So meaning, we must engage our government. We must participate and, be part of that solution. Because the truth is, the government of today, we are not foreigners. We are Nigerians. We are Lagosians. And as such, it's important for people to come in and be part of that solution. That's the only way we can move forward. Because data is the new currency. Without it, you really can't do anything. And we've been struggling over time. Lagos State has about 4 million registered with what we call the LASRA number. The truth is that we know the number of people in Lagos are more than that. So it's like people want to travel, but there is no passport. So it's difficult.
Thank you. Mr. Candid Johnson, let's go to a topic that you're very familiar and very comfortable with: reform in the justice sector space. You are the convener of the Justice Reform Project. What do you think, well, the perception out there about the judiciary and its service delivery is not very kind, it's not very charitable, and you have been one of the foremost critics of the institution. What in your mind, I know this is a topic that can be the subject of a 10-volume or more book. So if you can, in the short time that we have, just give us a peep into your mind about the justice sector, particularly in Lagos State.
Thank you very much. And this ties in, I think, respectfully to the comments that have been made by His Excellency the Deputy Governor. You know, I have no doubt, I don't want to, though I joked about not wanting to be seen with you, I know that it's an extremely important and extremely difficult job that you do. Lagos in particular, because Lagos is like an oasis of prosperity in a nation. I was speaking to a client who looked out the window in Lagos and said, this is the country, there's nothing else. I mean, maybe you can't say that, but I can say it. So it's a big problem. The data, the control of movement is a federal matter. So the constitutional arrangements are an impediment to the proper administration of Lagos State, because control of data, control of per head tax for individuals, control of movement. I would find somewhere, you know, when you have a difficult situation, you have to spend a lot of energy determining how to overcome it. And speaking for myself, there are many ways where I would try to disrupt the impediments of the federal constitutional system, but that's for another date. But then, to the question of justice sector, you know, I started again when I was talking about the government by starting with definitions, because if you don't understand the purpose of a thing, you cannot administer it properly. The purpose of justice delivery is a public service. It is a fundamental pillar of government. If you cannot determine disputes effectively, efficiently between citizens, one, you will have a high potential for law and order to break down. And as far as economy is concerned, if you do not have an efficient and effective disposal of justice, you will not have the investment that you require. Because I would rather invest in Ghana, my $10,000, than in Lagos, because I know that my $10,000 will reasonably appreciate in Ghana, where there's a more predictable system of justice. So if you recognize it's a public service and that it's a product to be delivered to the optimal value, I say this 100 times, and I do come from a judicial family. Justice is not about the fancy dress. It's not about honorable this or honorable that. Actually, the fancy silk robe that we wear, that gold one, I've not worn it in 10 years. I find it ridiculous and burdensome, because it detracts from the simple fundamental of the task we have, which is to deliver a justice system. In the criminal law, it's important that people should have the assurance that if they commit a crime, they will be apprehended, they will be prosecuted, and they will be convicted. That is a signal to the public. And it's not about, you don't beat people with sticks in every event. If people know that 9 out of 10 cases will be apprehended and they will be, this is why in America and UK, 40 years they will charge you with a crime. Because people need to know that crime is not going to pay. Then you don't have to pursue everybody with a stick. But if people don't know, then you pursue people with a stick and they take a chance because they feel that maybe they can subvert the system on this occasion. I'm bigger than the law. In the civil justice system, businesses can't do, if you can't predict the legal environment, you cannot invest. In Lagos, traditionally we have had the best judiciary in the country, but that's not good enough. We need to have the best judiciary in Africa. We need to have a judiciary that is better than that in Kenya, or in Ghana, or in Sierra Leone, which are competing for the very same investment dollars as we are. Now, I think that Our judiciary, and I must use Lagos as an example, it's what we're most familiar with, has lost the plot. The idea that the grandiosity and the pomposity of the office is more important than the delivery. For example, the question of COVID. COVID has revolutionized the administration of government across the world. Justice delivery, things that were overdue for us to maximize efficiencies in our justice system, which we had a golden opportunity to do when we had the disastrous pandemic which stopped us from assembling in close proximity. Those things have not been done. I know that the Ministry of Justice has made tremendous efforts, but I know, and I'm sorry, Mr. Attorney General, it may not be something that you're willing to say, but there is an obstructive inertia in the judiciary of Lagos State which prevents advances of basic, simple technology that will improve the lives and the justice system in this country. This is just a simple fact. If I was Attorney General, I wouldn't be able to say that. But let me tell you that. They're very simple things. Why are lawyers crowding out outside the courts, infecting themselves with COVID, and then going to the court one by one? Why can I go to court as a senior advocate of Nigeria and disrupt the entire schedule because I happen to be senior? If my case is at 10, it should be at 10. Most cases, 60% of the work done by our courts is procedural and motion business. It should not require an individual to appear before a judge. That already takes down 6% of their work. Much of the argument can be done by paper or even by phone calls. I mean, if you had confidence in the justice system, then you wouldn't be afraid of calling up a judge and saying, I need an order, because you know that there are problems that are beyond us here. The regulation of the legal profession is another one of those problems, because there is such a collapse in discipline in the legal profession that a lawyer can lie in the court. If you lie, the lawyers who lied for President Trump in the United States are going to lose their licenses. So it's an existential risk that you take. But if you don't have that risk here, then you start putting yourself into the area of conspiracy and darkness. If you get this lawyer, he will talk to the judge. You have to get a lawyer. A client told me that directly. I need a lawyer who can talk to the judge. And that was bye-bye to the case. But this is a problem, because if all the big guys can talk to the judges, then the small guys are going to upturn the system of justice. They're going to burn down the High Court because it represents the tool of oppression against them, and they cannot access it. A system of justice must be accessible. It must be rational. It must be equitable. And everybody should be able to see this.
Very powerful statement indeed. I expected no less. I don't know if Your Excellency would like to respond to that, or would you like to? You've had vast governmental experience in the last 20 years or so. And, there's a lot of criticism about the intellectual prowess or the level of legislation that we get at the federal and at the state levels. It's been said oftentimes that many state houses of assembly are rubber stamps of the executive. What in your mind is behind this impression?
Well, I guess it has to do with mistrust. But for us as a government, like Mr. Candide Johnson said, our job is to get things done. So the question is how. So for us, if we have what we call the executive legislative parley. So usually we do it quarterly, but because of COVID, it's been a bit slowed down. So what that does for us is we bring in outsiders, we bring in some of the party leaders, all the executive members, and all the legislature, and then even at the federal, to say, well, this is the agenda for Lagos. So in those meetings, we discuss things like the issue of NIWA. NIWA is a National Inland Waterways Agency that mandates Lagos to pay for a bridge. So we think it's outrageous. We are building a bridge in our state, and we have to pay a federal agency. So those are where we discuss those issues to say, you as our senators, you as our, take this to the federal, bring the law, and so on and so forth. So the same thing within the House of Assembly. So we will have had a session about our budget. This is what the executive is thinking. So they will have formed a committee with the commissioner in charge, so that behind the scene, a lot of discussions, a lot of arguments. So by the time we send it, it's already known. So it's not a rubber stamp. It's that we dialogue a lot more. We have, and people coming from outside. So we've invited senior advocates, we've invited politicians, professors of law, and so on and so forth. They will talk to us about essence of governance, so that we sit in a room for 3 days. Therefore, it allows us to understand our different perspectives as constituents, and we've changed a lot of things because we've listened to each other. So it's not a rubber stamp. It's because of the level of engagement that we've had as a government in Lagos State. So for me, again, like he said, what exactly is our role? Is our role to go and fight or argue, or to deliver service? So in order to deliver service, we think that we should engage more, discuss. So before we send something to the House, we will have called the people, the committee, say, these are the things we are sending. What are your views? This is why, and in most cases we change it based on their views and so on. And then therefore, so because of the engagement, it makes it easier for us to get things done in Lagos.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go to the interactive part of this session, and we're going to see if anybody in the audience, or whether physically present or virtually, has questions for either the Deputy Governor of Lagos State or Mr. Yemi Candid-Johnson, SAN.
All right, so please just indicate by the raise of a hand, and it will come to you. And if you rather write your question, the question cards are being passed around. You can ask the questions, and they'll pass on to the moderator, who will then decide who to channel the questions to. Do I say hand up? Okay, there's a hand up here. Remember one event we had, and we said, if you have questions, we asked one man, he said he doesn't know I will get home. So the questions have to be related to this panel, please. Yes, sir.
Thank you. His Excellency, the Deputy Governor, the Honorable Attorney General, the Landed Senior. My name is Tijani Mohamed Borodo. I'm a solicitor and advocate, and also the second Vice President of IOD. I've heard my learned colleague, Mr. Candid-Johnson, saying things that he would say, otherwise you would not say them if you are an Attorney General. Now, the learned SAN, if you are the Attorney General, what 2 things will you do to bring the reform in the judiciary that we need in Lagos State? Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So, Your Excellency, sir, do we take all the questions together so that... yes. Okay. So we'll take all the questions together. The moderator will be taking down the questions, and he knows who to channel the questions to. There's the man in the cap. No, not the one. Let's alternate them. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Olanrewaju Fagbon. Let me thank the panelists for what they have done. My questions. The begging culture that subverts the rule of law and due process. Waiver of rules for the powers that be that subverts the rule of law and due process. Investment of public funds in infrastructure that are not credible, and no sanction when those things go flat, what do we do?
Okay,
how do we meet them? Because when we talk of strong institutions, when we talk of strong men, we have had situations where institutions, the rules are there, the regulations are there, but they are not followed. What do we do? Thank you very much.
All right, so there's three-pronged questions, I guess. Three-pronged questions, noted. Because when you started with beggars, I thought you were talking about those ones at the junctions. Okay, so yes, the man in front of you, yes.
Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Dele Alimi. I am the Director General of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria. And I am particularly intrigued by the concept that was, or what I would say, what the son said a few minutes ago. And it's about the breakdown in the social contract between the people and government. And for me, it's so bad now that government is not believed. Even when government means well, even when government is doing well, even when policies are put in place for the sake of the people, people don't believe. People just don't trust. What can government do to bridge that gap? I pity those who are in positions today because the social media has made it worse for them. They are battered left, right, and center. Not because they are not doing the right thing, but just because no matter what they do, people just don't believe. What do we do? Thank you.
There's another one. I think we'll take two more questions and then we'll rest. There's one on the other side. After that, it will be the last question.
Mr. Deputy Governor and the panelists and Leonard Silk, my colleagues were asking, why am I asking a question? I said, am I not a Lagosian? It's not a difficult question. It was a question that has been asked before, but he asked for two things. I just wanted to see if you could make it four in answering four things that we could do to improve some of those things. So we'll have more to work on, not just two.
So he's added to it. Is that okay? So you can bring the question cards. So just bring all the question cards, and so my fourth, the last question. Come. It's like taking prayer requests. All right.
Thank you very much. So I'll read the question. It says, please, why is justice administration slow? Why can't justice be made after being checked? Rules should be administered. Why must women suffer for years while walking for justice?
I think that question is about delayed justice, I think.
Yes,
okay.
yes. All right. So, and then the other one is, in developing regulations, how do we ensure that the government is transparent about the intent of the regulation? E.g., is the regulation to drive revenue or change behavior? So we'll start with that last question, and I would ask that of the Deputy Governor, Your Excellency, to respond to that. I can repeat it. It says, how do we ensure that government is transparent about the intent of regulation? Is it driven by revenue or to change behavior?
Well, I think it depends on what it is. Most of the time, we've mentioned it before, that we must also engage government just like government must engage citizens. So I'll give you an example. When Lagos was building all the master plans, Lekki master plan, doing GIS, so there were meetings. I remember even in this hall, then there was no COVID, it was huge, like 4,000 people here. And there were questions, answers as to why you need to build a master plan. So because we must also live in a regulated environment, so that you should be able to live your life without disturbance from others. So that's the essence of policies, to make sure that everybody understand the way the setup is and I can plug into that without interfering with somebody else's rights. So a lot of it doesn't necessarily have to do with revenue. Now, don't let's make a mistake. Government needs revenue to do its job, so that's why there are taxes and so on. But everything doesn't end with revenue, no. So don't drive one way. That's nothing to do with revenue. So if you are charged and then you pay some, is to deter, not necessarily because of the revenue, because the reality is it could lead to death for other citizens. So majority of the time, engagement actually happens during budget. The Ministry of Budget goes around to all the Ibile. Ibile is Ikeja, Ikorodu, Badagry, and the rest, to make sure that citizens participate. And I think as you've seen here, when the Honorable Commissioner for Economic Planning was talking about the various embeds, there has been 195 or so resolutions, and 90% has been met. So those are coming from, so some of the resolutions here, when we report in 2 years' time or so, some of it will have been met. So it's to engage and get people involved as to, okay, what are the things that we need to do? Because government cannot claim to have monopoly of knowledge, and as such, knowledge from citizens coming, and people are able to tap into. So it's not for revenue per se, but it's to make sure that we all live our life peacefully without, interfering with each other's rights.
Thank you very much, sir. So to my favorite question of the day, to Mr. Candid Johnson. Two people have asked this. The first instance, they asked for two things you will do if you were appointed as Attorney General to reform the judiciary. And Mr. Sami Gube, the Honorable Commissioner for Economic Planning, has also asked you for 4 things. So we'll take the 4. So over to you, sir.
To reform the judiciary, 4 things. Of course, I'm not going to answer my good friend Alhaji Tijani Borodo's question, because any advice and suggestion I had for the Attorney General, I would give him in a private telephone call. But as to the judiciary, if I had a magic wand, I would abolish fancy dress. It may not look substantive, but it brings the mind back to the fact that you are a public servant delivering a public service. I mean the 16th century English wigs that we wear, which even the English don't wear anymore. Because it's sort of this whole thing. I would explode the mystery of justice. Every person should be able to approach the seat of justice and understand who they're talking to. That's one thing. Second thing is that I would abolish excessive proceduralization. Proceduralization is one of the biggest banes of our justice system. It allows people to embrace delay because it sounds fanciful. Almost every legal process that enters the justice system can be reduced to a form. It can be reduced to a set of collectible data which can be processed by a machine. For example, I explained to the judges in Lagos at a conference I attended many years ago that the University of London created an artificial intelligence program which examines decisions given cases presented before the European Court of Justice. In 85% of the cases, the computer reached exactly the same decision as the judges. So why do I need human judges? The fact is that we need human judges because we need some flexibility in the law. They need to see certain things and they need to exercise discretion. They need to be able to, even though discretion was programmed into the computer. But then there's certain things you need human beings for. The law must have certain flexibility. There's situations that may not be predicted. This is why you need to have human judges. But the range of discretion, the range of the exercise of drama in open court should be kept to a minimum. Most criminal cases should be so obvious that if you charge somebody with a criminal case, it should be so obvious that you call his lawyer. Like you see that in the American justice system, when they want to indict a big man, they don't go to the press and arrest him first and harass his wife and children. What they do is they spend 6 months to 2 years investigating. Then they issue a press conference saying, we are charging Senator X with the following 14 counts on the basis of this evidence. When it's laid out, when you tell people in advance what is the case against you, and you tell them that, look, we have 500 judges. These judges have 100 hours each. 5,000 or 50,000 hours has to be used for 150,000 cases. Therefore, we have to divide the time of the judges equally and equitably across all these cases. If you're going to settle this case right now and plead guilty, I'm going to give you a 6-month suspended sentence. If you go to trial and you lose, you're getting 10 years. That's how it works. It's exceptional in America for a criminal trial, for a criminal case to go to trial. In civil courts in other countries, in Singapore, in the UK, in America, the judges understand that they're administering a limited public resource and that they cannot afford to waste it. You cannot allow any counsel, no matter how grand or important he thinks he is, to waste his time. Honorable Attorney General, you have 10 minutes. Because your case is just as important as everybody else's case. And there's no reason why I, as a senior advocate, should be able to obstruct and block the court process for a whole day, while other people less distinguished than myself can't have the case. The favor that is given to me obstructs the confidence other people have in the system of justice. And judges have to recognize they are administering a limited public resource and they must distribute it across a variety of situations and people equitably. That basic fairness in the logistics of the courts would achieve a remarkable reduction of the cases. This whole idea, I got an adjournment, or a lawyer turning up in court and saying his car broke down. In other jurisdictions, a lawyer turns up unprepared for a case, he's going before the Bar Council on disciplinary charge. I don't care whether his uncle is the deputy governor. Because you have to have a responsibility to your profession. And all our rules tell us that every lawyer has a responsibility to the administration of justice. Therefore, you should cooperate. Why should you turn up and waste the time because you're a big silk? And this is very common. A great amount of the abuse in the courts comes from senior lawyers. And because senior lawyers do it and get away with it, junior lawyers try to hope when it's their turn they can do the same thing. All this is extremely damaging to the reputation of the system of justice, and I'll put a stop to that. I think that's 3 things or 4 things. That's just 2. Yes. Okay. Okay, let me think. Another. Certainly, I would digitalize. I would digitalize the filing. One of the biggest sources of corruption in the judiciary is in the filing of processes and the dealing with administrative staff. Much of that stuff can be dealt with online. It's very simple. I enter my card. I mean, we're using these things we're using cards for a variety of reasons. We can exclude by digitalizing and making sure filing and all these processes are automatic. Second thing I would do is in the allocation of cases. One of the biggest problems, I think, with confidence in the judiciary is this impression that somebody knows somebody. The allocation of cases to judges should be automatic. Only in exceptional cases should it be discretionary. When it's discretionary, then some big chief can tell the chief judge that, find me a judge who is very kind to me. This is a form of corruption. And when these things happen and people hear them, people don't believe in the system of justice. We're talking about exploding the trust deficit. The fact that I doff my cap to these public servants sitting here because I know something of the type of work that they do. But I know it because I have access to some of that information. I can look on a website. I can see what laws were passed. I know it's important for the deputy governor to have a discussion with the speaker and to know to have a common legislative agenda. But the man on the street doesn't know this. He just believes that all you big guys in the fancy dress and the fancy cars are going to take our money and give us the change. It's the responsibility of leaders to persuade the people that they lead that they're worthy of this mantle. So it's a big job. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. I wouldn't like your job, and I don't want the job of the Attorney General either. So I thank you for doing it. But from time to time, as a member of the public, I will say what I think about the things that need to be done. There's so much. Lagos Judiciary can make a difference. Lagos Judiciary can change the face of justice in Nigeria in 6 months.
Your Excellency, the Deputy Governor, Mr. Alimi, asked about the breakdown in the social contract between the governed and the governors. How do you react to that?
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about that separately. For me, and we need to be brutally honest, what I see generally, and it's not just in Nigeria, you can see even the United States, somebody lost an election, he lied, and people just believed it. And that's a country like United States of America. So it seems like it's an angry world. The world is just angry. Everybody is angry around the world for whatever reason. So you can see what is happening during the Syrian war, when people were migrating, running all over the place. Germans were angry at Angela Merkel, and so on and so forth. So there seems to be so much tension in the world. But for us here in this part of the world, I look at everything that has happened to us as a nation with the breakdown of families. So how is it that a man can have a wife, have 3, 4, 5 children, whatever the number, and just leave and say, oh, I'm just leaving. Just leave the woman with the children. What type of society is that? So it's not just about government, it's about us as a people. So how do you expect that woman to cope? And our country is littered with that. Hundreds of thousands. The men did not die. They just left for whatever reason. So the breakdown of the family is fundamental to the problems that we have as a people. And we need to face it and bring that back. So maybe the lawyers can help us. Maybe there should be a law like everywhere else. It's okay. Nobody can force you to not leave your wife or your husband, but you must take care of those children as long as they are your children. So those are, because remember, those children are members of the society. And if they don't have the care and the necessary things, they will misbehave. And so for me, I think those are the fundamental issues that we have. The families are broken down. I give you an example. I was in a state in the north. So we were on inspection. I was in Abuja then. We were on inspection. And I was talking to a security guard in an hotel, like around 10 p.m. It's a 37-year-old young man, a security guard. He has 17 kids. Now, he doesn't know where 11 of them are. So maybe they are Alimojiri, whatever. He doesn't. So tell me. So I wonder, I was thinking in my head then, so what is the role of, who is this man? And he's happy about it. He was able to tell, I'm meeting him for the first time. So it's something that does, and our society is full of things like that. No, I think the light just. So our society is, we have those type of situations. So no society in my view can prosper when you have those type of, and so it's the belief, that's why we now have a sort of this mentality that, oh, somebody owes me something. And, the fact that I don't have to, there are people that comes to you and you even give them jobs and they're like, wow, so I can't do this. Okay, so you can't do this. You are not a graduate, you are not an artisan, you are not a good plumber, you are not a this. So what else can you do? So as a family, I think we really need to go back the way we raise our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. So there's one final question from Professor Fagbon, SAN, former Vice Chancellor, Lagos State University. So we all know that in Nigeria, perhaps the bane of enforcing laws is this call from your relative, from your friend, from your acquaintance, from your classmate, or from even people who are superior to you, to look the other way when somebody they know has done something in violation of a law, of a regulation, or perhaps is not even deserving of a position they want him to get to. Mr. Deputy Governor, sir, your vast experience and knowledge in governance, how do you think this can be addressed? I will also pose the same question to Mr. Candid Johnson, but we start with Your Excellency, sir.
No, I think you should answer that because I'm under such pressure, so maybe you can advise me. No, seriously, I think you should start first.
There again about proceduralization. I remember having a similar conversation to this nature with, I think it was Fola Adeola many years ago, and talked about setting up Guarantee Trust Bank. And he said then that, everybody just you own the bank, they want somebody to work. And the former head of state sent a CV. And he said, Your Excellency, she will have to take the test. This is the big thing. She took the test. When she took the test, he showed the former head of state the test results. It curtails his enthusiasm for pressurizing you. Now, in our offices, someone sends somebody, a big shot sends me his daughter. I say, she needs to take a test. She gets less than 50% of the test. Nothing's going to happen. So the fact is that there are mechanisms by which you can mitigate this pressure. But then the pressure is a social, cultural, political pressure. But if procedures are set up and they are public and they are transparent, it's back to the transparency of government. So the transparency is a defense. Of course, I will call the permanent secretary. He will put her on the list. The permanent secretary knows the procedure is very clear. She goes to the test. She falls, in all companies. My wife worked in an oil company. Very often you'd get a message saying, can we get a job in Total? And it's very simple. Their procedure was clear. No job inquiry can arise before a publication of vacancy requirement. So somebody say, well, look, you need to look out for when they publish the vacancy because nothing is going to happen. Once that is done, you have a CV. Your CV needs to be loaded online. If it comes from me, they won't accept it. The Federal Department of Establishments or the Lagos State Department, they won't, you can't subvert, you can't make a law and then subvert it. So law is a defense. It's a defense for public officers in particular. I'd love to help you. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you, someone will speak to you and tell you what you need to do. Bring your degree, certificate, etc. But I cannot subvert a process which I have publicized as being the measure by which this government is accountable to the public and subvert it because of you. Omafimisi Jogbon. You can't really say that in English, can you? It has to be Omafimisi Jogbon. So this is the situation. So you defend yourself with the procedure. I find the procedure as a defense. So people come, just as the Supreme Court says someone wants a job, it's very simple, sir. He has to take the test. And then the next thing you tell him is that, I'm speaking to you because your uncle is just in the Supreme Court. But if you don't pass this test, it's irrelevant. I can't help you. And someone who recently came to my office, a senior advocate sent a daughter to me. And she seemed so underwhelming that I thought the best I could do was to hand her over to the managing associate to interview her. Maybe it was a bad day. And her performance was so poor, we just lapsed the application. I would not expect anybody to take my children who are incompetent to do a job. If there's an opportunity, if I'm running a business, and I'd like to have your son because I know him, I know he can account you, and it's my private business. But not, public office is a public trust. It is regulated by law for a reason. Part of that reason is to protect the public. It's also to protect the public officer himself.
Well, I agree with him, and I think that, I think you will notice exactly what happened with the selection of our current permanent secretaries. Before now, there will be all sorts of pressures, people calling. But we said, look, Mr. Governor said, look, so what of people that don't know us? Is it that people who don't know us, who have been working in the system, will never be permanent secretaries? So, okay, let everybody go and set some tests for everybody. They did it, and the score was publicized. So if you score less than 60, whatever it is, then you're out. And it was seamless. People were interviewed, and nobody called to complain. So I think it's just transparency, and there will still be pressure, and people will say you are a bad man, but you just have to take it.
Thank you very much. As we wind down, we will just ask our two panelists for their parting shots, starting with the Deputy Governor. If you could really, like at the flick of the switch, do something to strengthen our institutions, what will that be?
So I think the first thing really, like Mr. Yemi Candid Johnson said, honestly, is competence. So we should make sure that in everything we do, competence is important. In our selection, employment, whatever it is. So not just because I know A or I know B. We will go nowhere if people are not competent. And, for me, I think that's the most important thing as a nation. We have filled our society, in my opinion, in various levels with people who should not be in that position. And it doesn't matter how even honest those people are. You can't do the job. So the moment you can't do that job, there will be trouble. And therefore, that's the bane of our society. So for me, competence, competence, competence. Thank you
very much. Mr. Candid Johnson, you have been so forthright. I ask of you one more time, your parting shot in terms of the entire justice sector. You've said so many things you will do, but just maybe sum it up again for us. What do you see as quick fixes? What do you see as low-hanging fruits?
Assuming that there is a will, and I have no doubt there's political will, but there has to be will in the judiciary as well, then you need to make examples. Certainly in every aspect of government, I think that it's important, we talk about the Chinese and the efficiency of the system of government, which is beyond, it's institutionalized, it's beyond individuals right now. That price has been paid with imprisonments, broken heads, and beheadings. The fact is that a judge forget about China, in Singapore, and I remember, I have friends who are in the judiciary in Hong Kong. I remember being told a story which was typical. They have what is called the Office of Professional Responsibility. It investigates judges. If a judge is accused of corruption, in Nigeria, that's this thing that you cannot go to court before they've been investigated by NGC, which does no investigation in any event. If the Office of Professional Responsibility investigates a judge and he's found, he will go to jail. So just after I was in Hong Kong, maybe 10, 15 years ago, the friend was saying, oh, the judge in Singapore had just killed himself. Why? Because it was announced that the Office of Professional Responsibility was investigating him. People need to be afraid to break the law. There's a habit in Nigeria that the law is just for fools and for poor people. And the poor people here are saying that. And it means, therefore, that we cannot govern properly. And it means that the poor people have no confidence in the system of justice. And at the very first opportunity, they will subvert it, and they will subvert you as well. So, quick fix. I've said this on many occasions. I would investigate, when my father was Director of Public Prosecutions in Western Nigeria, he said they used to have X squad in the police. He said, you hear a magistrate is taking bribe, you tell the litigant to go and give him marked money. 5 seconds later, you arrive and you arrest him, the money's on his hand. It's even easier to trace money today than marked ink. Follow the money. If you follow the money, you will find 3 prime examples to send to jail.
Thank you very much. That brings this to an end. I hand over to Ali Baba.
I would like to ask Madam Sholape, I think you'll come join this picture. Let's have a picture, group picture. Please. Just use the other staircase. Use the other staircase. The other one is closer to you. Come up. Hope you have a mask on. It's a funny thing. The deputy governor was talking about a security guard that had 17 children. And then there was a National Assemblyman that was bragging that he had 27 or something. And he brought the 4 wives, the manufacturing companies, he brought them to the floor of the National Assembly. Are we good? Thank you so much. I think they need to do something about the registration, especially in Lagos. There's a man who, there's a guy, he just passed now, Mr. Adebayo, who bought a Rolls Royce. And 2 weeks after he bought the Rolls Royce, they were just taking the car to gauge tires. One guy rammed into the Rolls Royce with a Danfo, and Jackpa got on a bike and took off. So they traced the boss and found out that the registration number was a bus number that had been burnt like 10 years ago. So he just took the number plates and put on his own. So they need to sort that out quickly. This is caucus meeting. If you see this kind of meeting at National Assembly, they are sharing money. Excellency, Mujasi. No, but you know the speaker mentioned it. The speaker mentioned it that day, so it's not like. I'm doing that now. Considering the 3 other breakout sessions, please, my colleague, Mojibade Shosonya, will come and help us announce the key breakout sessions. All right. So the breakout sessions?
For the breakout sessions, we have in the Asia room, the ushers will direct you just in case you need help. Speaking about security, law and order, balancing regulation and economic growth, our speakers will be Kehinde Durosimi Eti, Tayo Ainde, Dr. Kemi Da Silva, Funkola Odeleye, and Sandra Oyewale. These will happen in the Asia room. So if you're interested in this discussion, which is on security, law and order, balancing regulation and economic growth, please ask the ushers to lead you to the Asia room. Asia. We don't have the headset available, so we'd have to go physically to the rooms to be a part of the breakout sessions. I'll take you again. So this is the Asia room. If you're interested in security, law and order, balancing regulation and economic growth, please ask the ushers to lead you to the Asia room. The next will be the Africa room. So you can ask the ushers if you're interested. The topic is the Office of the Citizen, Citizen Participation in Governance. So this is time to actually get citizens involved because we have to work together. Our speakers are Yemisi Ransom Kuti, Princess Adebowale, Yemi Adamolekun, Soji Apampa, and Mrs. Alero Otubo. Now this room is the Africa room. So if you're interested in the topic, the Office of the Citizen, that is citizen participation in governance, please ask the ushers to lead you to the Africa room. And finally, the last room, but not the least, is the Antarctica room. The topic is the role of transparency, institutional effectiveness, and accountability in governance. The role of transparency, institutional effectiveness, and accountability in governance. Our speakers are Professor Pat Utomi, Mr. Joe Cosma, and Miss Mary Iwelumo. So if you're interested in this topic, which is the role of transparency, institutional effectiveness, and accountability in governance, please ask the ushers to lead you to the Antarctica room. So we have Antarctica, Africa room, and Asia. So if you need any help, please speak to the ushers. Thank you very much. Just to reiterate, we have the Asia room, which is on security, law and order, balancing regulation and economic growth. Our speakers are Kehinde Durosimi Eti, Tayo Aide, Dr. Kemi De Silva, Funkola Odeleye, and Sandra Oyewale. That is on security, law and order, balancing regulation and economic growth. This is happening at the Asia room, so if you're interested. Then we have the Africa room, the Office of the Citizen, Citizen Participation in Governance. Our speakers are Yemisi Ransom Kuti, Princess Adebowale, Yemi Adamolekun, Soji Apampa, and Mrs. Alero Otubo. And finally, happening at the Antarctica room, the role of transparency, institutional effectiveness, and accountability in governance. We have three speakers, Professor Pat Utomi, Mr. Joe Cosma, and Miss Mary Iwelumo. So if you're interested, please ask the ushers for directions. We're going physically to the rooms because the headsets are not available for us to connect. So please feel free to speak to the ushers and they'll direct you accordingly. Thank you very much.